Good morning. All right. You have just remembered what our Lord and Savior Jesus did for us by giving us his body and blood. And now we're going to continue in honor of him. We're not even stopping. We're going to continue to meditate on how he who gave his life for us wants us to live. So, if you'll join me, and we'll think together this morning on how we'll live for the Lord. Now, I have to confess, for those of you who do not like sports analogies, it's too late. I'm sorry. But it won't last too terribly long. There are some of you who will recognize some of these nicknames in the basketball world. Okay? So here we go with the nicknames. You might be familiar with Pistol Pete. Anybody? All right. And the next is Dr. J. Who's that? Julius Irving. Good, good. And then the next one is let's see, after Dr. J, what do we? Magic Johnson. Okay. And then the next one after that is His Airness. Michael Jordan. Okay. I was surprised you didn't get that one. This one guy, His Airness Michael Jordan. And then the next one, LeBron the King James. And then the next one is Steph the Chef Curry. Okay? Well, I want you to know that I play basketball too. Mondays and Wednesdays, I play basketball in this very building, right here at Anacortes Christian Church Anacortes. I said Amity. Where am I at? Amity, Oregon. So right here in Amity, Oregon, every Monday and Wednesday, I play basketball right there across the hallway. And but I don't have a nickname. Yeah. And when you're standing behind a pulpit on Sunday, I just got to tell you the truth. The reason why I don't have a nickname is because I'm no good. That's the truth. But it doesn't really matter because I enjoy playing the game. Okay, and it's a good reason to get my body out there moving, and I can get some exercise. It's just a very, very good thing for me to play basketball, and I've been doing it for a long time. In fact, 37 years ago, I was playing basketball in Anacortes, Washington, and that is where I first met my friend Mark. Now, Mark, way back in 1986, he would twice a week open up the gym for about 30 basketball lovers so that we could play. And he would, now Mark, you need to know something about him. He was a committed religious skeptic, okay? And I was the associate minister of the Anacortes Christian Church at the time. So, now he didn't know that. It took us a while to get to know each other, but that's who we were. Now, Mark noticed toward the beginning that I was not religious like some of the other basketball players that were playing with us. Some of the basketball players, when something in their game went kind of awry, kind of went wrong, they would call upon Jesus Christ very loudly. I see you know what I mean. Some even called upon God to condemn something to eternal perdition if something went wrong. But I myself, I wasn't religious at all. I was just plain gross, okay? So whenever I shot and missed a basket, I might say something like, fetid filth. Whenever I dribbled the ball off my foot and it went out of bounds, I might say something like, putrid pus. So I was not religious like the other guys, just kind of gross. It's what I call creative cussing, the kind of cussing that you can do in church. So, now, there was another difference between some of the other basketball players and myself that Mark noticed. At the end of the night, a lot of them would take off their basketball shoes, put on their street shoes, and gather their sweats and put them in a bag, and they'd just immediately leave. Some of the others would do all that, but they might leave in 2s and 3s talking as they go out to the parking lot. But Mark noticed that I would help him gather the balls and drill up the baskets that folded up and check and make sure the doors are locked and sweep the floors. And as we were doing that, we would talk about some of the things that went on in basketball during that night. We would talk about local news, maybe something about the weather if there was something outstanding. And so that happened like that for about a year. And then one day Mark told me, he said, as I was getting ready to pay, he said, no, not you. You don't pay. We're friends. That was kind of cool. So now Mark and his wife, they bought property. Beautiful property, view of a mountain, little lake, and it was such nice property that they didn't have enough money to build a house on it. So they obtained a cabin that they could get for free if they would just haul it off the land where it was. And so he figured out how to haul that cabin to his own property, and that way they could live on their property without paying any rent, and they could save all their money until they had enough money to build a house on their property. It's pretty ingenious. However, the cabin did not have any plumbing. So on the basketball nights during the week, Mark would haul in his pickup 4 large containers, and at the end of the night, when everybody's gone, he would fill the containers up, and I would help him carry the containers in and put them into his pickup so that his family would have water. And then he would shower. Well, we would shower in the locker room. You know how locker rooms are with all that tile, and it makes you sound good. All that reverberation. And so, yeah, some of you are nodding. And so Mark and I would be at night in the locker room, and even we sounded good. Yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-oh, ghost riders in the sky. It sounds better with the reverberation. Trust me. But by that time, we were buddies. Now, Mark was a teacher, and a special teacher at that. He was a teacher of a multi-grade classroom. So his classroom went from 3rd to 6th graders in the same room, same teacher. And so he began having me read novels that he assigned to the 6th graders. And after I'd read them, then he would make me discuss the novels with them in depth. And then he was ready to have a great discussion with the 6th graders the next day. Sometimes he would have me volunteer to read some literary work for his classroom, to read it aloud, or Or he would have me dress up in some historical character and go in and interact with the students. That was fun. So when I ask him to read the Gospel of Luke and Acts and the letter of Paul to the Romans, it was a complete natural thing to do. We had already been in the habit of reading things together and discussing things that were important to us. And he did. And we did talk about Jesus. You know how it is in our society where it's kind of scary or awkward to talk about religion or to talk about Jesus. It wasn't like that by this time between Mark and me. For example, he would tell me some of the difficulties that he had at his work in the school. And I would tell him some of the challenges that I had in my work in the church. It was just completely natural and relevant. So I learned a little bit about Mark's world, and Mark learned a little bit about my world. In fact, he learned that just like his multi-grade classroom, that the different students had different levels of maturity, different levels of understanding, different skill levels. He learned through me that in a church, people were at different levels of spiritual maturity and understanding. And then Mark figured out for the first time in his life, because he had always thought that churches were full of hypocrites, but he just figured out that some people are just younger in their level of spiritual maturity than other people. That is, that some of us are just not there yet. We're imperfect. Well, by this time in our friendship, he was able to discard that confirmation bias about the church being full of hypocrites, and then it became normal for him to just ask me deep questions about Jesus. Hard questions like, what happens to those who die without having heard of Jesus? So there we are. We don't just always sing Ghost Riders in the sky. Even though I was Mark's best friend at the time, he did not once visit our church. Not once. One of the dearest little third graders you would ever imagine came up to him. Okay, she came up to her teacher and she said, Mr. Perkins, I'm going to be singing in the children's musical at our church, and would you please come and watch me? Please, please, please. What would you do? I know. Not Mark. I'm telling you, he's one of the hardest cases you'd ever seen, that Mark. After Carol and I moved away, Mark noticed that of all the people in town, in Anacortes, he noticed that the people that he liked, the people that he most admired, were mature Christians. Two of those people were his work colleagues, and one of them actually became, later on, another basketball buddy. Well, I'm happy to announce that Mark was immersed into Jesus in the year 2001 while Carol and I were in Africa. And I told you this little story so that you can get an idea in real life of what Jesus means by salt. When Jesus says that to his disciples, to us, you are salt, that's kind of a concrete way of understanding what he means by that, how it is that Jesus wants to save the world. I told you about Mark and myself so that you would get that example. Jesus wants kingdom values that are in us. He wants those kingdom values to be seen by people who don't yet have those kingdom values. What do I mean by kingdom values? Well, you probably have a Bible on a phone or maybe in a book form. I have one in a book form because I'm old school. I have one on my phone too, but I like the book one. So if you go to Matthew chapter 5, and if you look at verse 3 and go all the way through verse 12, you'll know something about what I call kingdom values, and what Jesus means by it. Now, some of you who have been going to church for a long time, you'll notice that you'll say, Joe, those are the Beatitudes. Has anybody ever heard those words? Beatitudes? Has anybody ever used the word beatitude besides when you're talking about this passage of Scripture? No. I mean, when I was a little guy in Sheridan, I'm sure that the first time I heard beatitude, I thought it was something that you would step on if you saw it in the middle of your floor. Or maybe it was something on a map, like longitude, latitude, beatitude, if it goes somewhere else, We never use the word beatitude for any other reason. And so I like to use kingdom values because it kind of immediately lets us know what we're talking about. Kingdom, Jesus is our King. The Son of God, He's our King. We bow to Him. We want to serve Him as our King. We're His subjects. And the values, the way He thinks about reality. What is the truth about life and the reality? Jesus knows. So that's the values. So kingdom values is what we find in verse 3 through verse 12. Those Beatitudes, go ahead and if someone has a Bible, what's the first one? Just call it out. Thank you. Poor in spirit. Now, I like to paraphrase things because sometimes, when you hear things the same way for so often, you cease to think about it. So I'm paraphrasing it. Poor in spirit is my paraphrase is humility before God. That is to say, we know that we have been created by Him. Without Him, we just are not. We do not exist. Everything we are and can be is from Him. So that gives us a posture of humility before Him. And that's even before, I don't know about you guys, but that is even before talking about having offended Him. And if you know that you have offended God, wow. Okay. Humility before God. Okay. Now, the next beatitude. What's the next one? Just call it out. Morning. Yeah. Not morning like good morning, but morning like crying, weeping morning. And why? Well, here's my paraphrase, lamentation. We lament because of the status quo is so bad. The way the world is working right now, I don't have to tell you. In fact, I'm not going to tell you. You already get that enough. It is so bad that it's lamentable. We mourn. Okay, what's the next one? Meek. What does meek even mean? You look it up in a dictionary. There are 3 or 4 senses of what meek means. So we have a paraphrase here, and let me just try. Patience with wrong. So when things are not quite right, the way the world wants to do it, if something's not right, then you just go right there and you just straighten it out. Well, in the kingdom values, you have patience with something that is wrong. And why in kingdom values? Well, we go back to the humility of God. We were once Wrong. And he didn't straighten us out like that. There's a different way. Okay, what's the next kingdom value? Hunger and thirst for righteousness. It kind of sounds funny at the beginning because righteousness isn't something that you eat. And so I have the paraphrase, earnest. So this is something you desire. Earnest desire for right. You know, that's from God's point of view. But from our point of view, earnest prayer for right. He's the one that can fix everything. Earnest desire or earnest prayer for what is right. Okay? And the next beatitude. Merciful. Wow. And that kind of goes along with patience with wrong. Patience with wrong is he didn't just wipe us out. He didn't just wipe us out when we were wrong. He left us. But he didn't merely just leave us. He was so merciful that he sent his one and only son to die for our offenses. That's the kind of thing people like us wouldn't even make up. A God who would do that. And so, merciful. So when we see other people who are wrong, we too, wanting to be like him, because we have been destitute, we are humble before God, we are merciful to others too. It's just the way things should be. It's just so beautiful. Next beatitude. Pure in heart. Thank you. Pure in heart. That's the kind of person who doesn't have fine print on purpose at the bottom of a contract so you can trick people into getting what you want. You know? I mean, when you're pure in heart, you are genuine. When you're pure, and I have right down here, I have being radically sincere, honest, genuine, whole. There's not like one part of you here and then another part of you is, kind of doing something. No, pure in heart. And that's the way God is. When he was merciful, he really was merciful, and he is all in. And when we respond to him, there's nothing else. We are all in since he made us. Remember, we're humble before God. He's so patient with us with the wrong. So what's the next beatitude? Pardon? Peacemakers. We're kind of used to thinking of peacemakers as a good thing. Blessed are the peacemakers. But the peacemakers are the ones that are not trusted by either side. Because the peacemakers are listening to both sides. And that's kind of, if you're in the argument, that's not what you want. You want what you want. And so, but peacemakers in kingdom values, that is what is righteousness. That is what God longs for. He has done everything so that he can have a relationship with us again, even after we've offended him. He took steps. He is the ultimate peacemaker. And that's a value that we have if we're followers of Jesus. That's what the whole thing is about. Reconciliation of all things with God. Okay? What's the next value?
Those who are persecuted because of righteousness.
Yeah. So someone wants to do the right thing, even if nobody else is doing the right thing. Someone wants to do the right thing, even if people say bad things about him and make fun of him or her for doing the right things. Someone who wants the right thing so much because they hungered and thirst. Remember the earlier value? They hungered and thirst. Why? because it was so beautiful. Because that is what God is righteousness. So one develops so that no matter what, you are completely sincere, radically sincere and honest. The right thing is the right thing that you're going to do, and no one's going to shake you off that foundation, even in persecution. And then the very last one, go ahead. Be insulted for the king. Yeah. I mean, I've been insulted before, but I deserved it. That is to say, sometimes I don't play basketball the way I would like to. And then, if someone makes fun of me, I deserve that. But to be insulted because, and lied about, simply because you're a follower of Jesus, that happens in other places of the world all the time. We live in a nice place here, but it doesn't. So, and that's the ultimate. We're willing to suffer gladly for our Lord Jesus. And why? In these kingdom values? Because that is how he was able to reconcile with us. That's how God can reconcile. He sent Jesus to die for us. And so to us, it's just natural. Of course we want to love Jesus like that. It's just natural. So when I say kingdom of values, well, when Jesus talks about these kingdom values, that's what he means by salt. Okay? So think of yourselves, as one grain of salt. And if that one grain of salt loses its saltiness, Jesus says, we're now in verse 13, okay? I'll just go ahead and read that. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. Okay? Now, salt was used in those days to preserve food, so it wouldn't spoil and go rotten. And Jesus is saying, you preserve food. I mean, you preserve people. You preserve the earth so that it doesn't spoil and go rotten. And so you're one grain of salt. But if that one grain of salt, if you lose that character, that salty character that preserves people around you, that have connection with you, then you're no good for the mission. Because it's for preserving. So you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. That's pretty harsh, but that's the mission that we have. And the mission comes from those kingdom values. So when Jesus talks about salt like that, he's thinking about kingdom values lived out in your personality and in your life. That's why I told you the story about Mr. Perkins. Mark, my friend Mark. Okay. Now, being this salt is so essential to his mission, we are to influence the population at large by the kingdom values of Christ in our personality. Okay? Now, let me go to this next verse. In fact, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to skip something. Okay, here we go. I'm going to tell you about Judge Judy. The reason why I'm going to tell you about Judge Judy it will become apparent. Just bear with me, okay? So now, if I could have 3 elders come down and help me tell the story about Judge Judy. Now, and the reason why I'm doing this, I'll just tell you right now while they're coming, is later on, Jesus says, if someone slaps you on the one cheek, turn the other, right? They're not, no, don't worry, guys, don't worry. There's not going to be any slapping here, not here. So if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other, right? Isn't that what he says later on? And then he says, if someone sues you for your shirt, give them your coat as well. Are you kidding me? That's what the world thinks. Really? It's kind of a hard teaching, isn't it? Jesus says when someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Isn't that kind of weird from the world's point of view? Well, I don't mean to keep you standing too long. I'll just wait a second. I gotta get there. So, the reason why it seems weird is because we forget the kingdom values. So Jesus said this, it was one discourse, it was one sermon. And we were supposed to read those hard sayings, but we were supposed to remember what he had said at the beginning about the kingdom values. And so I'm telling you, all of that makes sense if you're thinking the way Jesus thinks about reality, about how things are, the kingdom of values. And so we always thought it was so hard living like a Christian. Well, it's kind of not hard when you think about Jesus. What we're going to do now is, because the next question is, well, how do you get to think about Jesus? How do you think like he does? And it takes practice. We're going to go through a little practice exercise, as if we were in basketball practice or something, so that we can learn how to think like Jesus thinks, and so that we can do some of those weird things. Okay, back to Judge Judy. I need to have a fence here, and so we'll stand right here, and I need a back fence, and if you could stand like this for me. Back fence. Right there. Now, so you're the back fence. Now, we will have our elder here run, if you could be the side fence. So you're kind of like that. Yep, and then there we go. Thank you. And then another side fence. Okay. So I'm watching this episode of Judge Judy, and this is one of the cases. Real cases. Hope your arms don't get tired out. Trying to talk really fast. So neighbor A lives right here in his yard, his fenced yard. Neighbor B lives in the backyard, or he lives behind neighbor A, okay? They share an adjacent fence. Now, neighbor A paid for all of this fence, but neighbor A and B shared the expense for this fence, which makes sense. Okay, neighbor A painted this fence dark brown because it matches the trim of his house, right? So he looks out this window, dark brown, dark brown, dark brown. When he looks outside of his house, dark brown, dark brown. But neighbor B, who paid for that part of the fence that's adjacent, he painted this part of the fence light brown. Neighbor A is angry because it's light brown back there. Judge Judy says, but you can't see that it's light brown from your house. Neighbor A says, yes, but if I drive down the street and go back onto the other street back here, and I can see between the house, I can see that it's light brown on the fence and it doesn't match the trim of my house. Judge Judy asks neighbor B if neighbor B is satisfied with the color that he painted on his fence. Neighbor B says, yes, I like the light brown that I painted on this fence. And now, you may be seated. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, see, someone wanted to do some hitting. You're all disappointed. Hey, I want you to honor these men who have decided to, and that you've chosen to lead you. A local church body is one of the wonders of the world. Very important. And so, anyway, so we had a little fun here, but very serious, very wonderful, wonderful thing that these men are doing. So honor them in the name of our Lord Jesus. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't watch the end of the Judge Judy episode, of that episode, because I kind of knew. So how do you think it should turn out? Yeah, there's no case, you know? And the only reason why they put that on the show is because neighbor A was just that kind of he just wasn't right. And neighbor B was going the whole time. He didn't say anything. He knew not to interrupt Judge Judy. Don't interrupt Judge Judy. and he didn't. He just said, there you go. Okay, that's what I'm saying. All right? So, in a normal situation, you know, so he charged $500 to have that repented. He sued for $5,000. He sued for $5,000 to have that back portion of the fence painted. Okay? Now, we're going to use this situation and we're going to apply the kingdom values on that entire situation. You will see that if we apply kingdom values, there would no longer be a Judge Judy's show. There wouldn't be any need. Okay, so remember the kingdom values, okay? What if we apply the kingdom values and we think about it, what does neighbor B do? How does he behave and why? Go ahead, you can call it out, because I'm pretty sure you're going to get it. He paints his the fence dark brown. And now we're going to go through this exercise about why he's going to paint his part of the fence dark brown. Because I know some of you are thinking, yeah, but this is America. It's his fence. He can have it however he wants it. He has the right. And that's true. He does have the right. But here, let me read to you what someone soaked in kingdom values thinks. Let me go to verse 14. Now, we've been talking about salt. Now, Jesus goes and starts talking about light. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Now, I'm going to skip verse 15, but we'll get back to it. Don't worry. I'm going down to verse 16. In the same way, that is, in the same way a city on the hill can't be hidden, in the same way, let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. You have kingdom values. That means you are humble before God, and you know what your Father in heaven has done for you. You know that you had nothing. Nothing. You were destitute because of the offense. And you know what he did for you. It is so beautiful. He was patient with your wrong. Okay? He didn't just wipe you out immediately. He was meek, patient with your wrong. He earnestly desired for you to be right, but not in a way where he forced you to be right. He showed his values, and you wanted to be right too. And you asked him, and he's helping you. He was merciful to you, and so you are merciful to others. You see how the values are working? He was all in, radically sincere about it, and you become honest, sincere. He's a peacemaker. I'm not even going to do all of the things. He is willing to be persecuted. Jesus died. We just remembered him dying on the cross, his body and blood. Okay? He was willing to be persecuted for us. And so we're willing. And so now let me put all of these kingdom values next to a light brown fence. The light brown fence all of a sudden doesn't seem to be very important. Let me do something else. Because you love your Father in heaven, let me put it, the chance to show the kingdom values to your neighbor, to that neighbor A. You have an opportunity here. And you love him. Now put that love next to light brown fence. Do you see how it makes sense to paint your fence? I'll even throw something into it. I would even, with the kingdom values, because of the peacemaker thing, because of loving the other guy, I would even invite neighbor A to, after I paint the fence, to a barbecue in my backyard. Neighbor A and his wife come, they see the fence, how it matches his trim. And I have a feeling that neighbor A kind of butts heads with a lot of people. But this went different than he has experienced ever in a long time. And then what happens? He begins to notice these values. He finds out from you that those values come from your heavenly Father, and then he begins to praise your heavenly Father because neighbor A now sees that this is the way the world should be. That is how we do Christian exercises, so that all of a sudden, living like that doesn't seem so hard in the light of the kingdom values. Let's go on to the light. Now, Jesus talks about salt, and then he talks about light. And it might seem like he's saying the same thing, and he's sort of saying the same thing, but with light, he wants to emphasize something different. With light, he wants to emphasize the position of the kingdom values. Let's read verse 14 together and 15. So I'm going to stop when I read, and then you could read the rest of it out loud. It'll be the position, okay? It'll be prepositions. So it's kind of a grammar English lesson today. So here we go. Verse 14 of Matthew chapter 5. Oh, there it is on the thing. That's pretty cool. Okay. You are the, all together here. You are the light of the world. A city. Yeah. Okay, now I want to kind of stop there. We're not doing very well. But it's not your fault. I didn't explain it. So I'll read, because I said we'll read it together. But you will just do it whenever I point at you. And I'm going to have you do it on the prepositions. Okay, so that's how we'll do it. All right? You are the light of the world. A city cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it Instead, they put it and it gives light to everyone in the house. You see how Jesus is emphasizing the position of the kingdom values? So light is the kingdom values in a strategic position in the world. Now, you would expect me to say that, being a person who goes to another place, to Africa, but it's not because I went to Africa that I'm saying that. It's because Jesus said this that I went to Africa. It's the other way around. So therefore, the kingdom values are in a strategic position, and that's what Jesus means by light. The strategic position is the presence of people who are not yet part of his kingdom. Jesus wants people outside of the kingdom to see the kingdom values in you. Therefore, deliberately cultivate that relationship with a dear relative who has not yet praised your Father in heaven. Ask that unbelieving co-worker over for dessert. Many foreigners in the United States may have never been invited into an American home, and consequently, they think that we're unhospitable. So, if you have an opportunity, reach out to that Pakistani neighbor's wife who wants to learn English. Strategic positioning of ourselves is not limited to our own national borders. As you already know, that is precisely why Carol and I gave up familiarity with our family, friends, and even our language to go and live in Africa, in another place that was, at the time, strange to us. And likewise, it is precisely the reason many of you gave up your hard-earned money to send us. Does that make sense from a worldly point of view? No, that's kingdom values stuff. Jesus uses the metaphor of the lamp and its stand in order to show us his kingdom values, that his kingdom values must be positioned strategically where it can give light to everyone in the house. And everyone in the house means all kinds of people in every ethnic group on the planet. And we know that because Jesus said, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. And in the same book, at the very last thing he said in the book of Matthew, go and make disciples of all ethnic groups, of all nations. Yeah. So you know he wants that. So I'll end here with another story. I started out with a story, I'll end with a story. Almost done here. I want you to go with me on a Bible translation checking mission. Okay? So, you'll have to use your imaginations. In your mind's eye, imagine that you are with me in a mud and grass hut of a small village. Are you imagining that? Okay. Do you hear the crickets outside? It's in the middle of the evening. You hear the crickets? All right. Are you starting to feel hot and clammy because it's really humid? Okay, you're imagining a little too much. You want to back off just a little bit. Okay. Okay, but just a little bit. Okay, now I had a draft of Luke, here we go, in my hand, and I'm tilting it toward a kerosene lamp. That's so that I can see it, because we're in a hut. And we have some other kerosene lamps throughout the hut. But I'm tilting it toward a kerosene lamp nearest me. Now, my job is to check the Bible's comprehensibility in a group of people who are unfamiliar with the gospel. Okay, so that's our job. Now, I would read the present draft of Luke, and I made notes of the reactions and the comments of the people in the group in connection with what I had just read. And I would make those notes and send it on to the head translator so that he would know whether the translation's good or bad. Okay, so I'm in chapter 15 of Luke, the parable of the lost son. When I read that the younger son said to the father, "Give me my share of the property," you see how people express surprise. Eh? Because no good son would ever do that. It is like saying, "Father, bleep you, all I want is your money." What happens next in the story is even stranger to the Manica people. The father gives the young man the money. That would never happen. There's no scolding, no beating. The father hands him the money. Eh? And at this point, you notice all the people in the hut have now moved their hands to their mouth in order to emphasize their emotion of surprise. So you can go ahead and try that right now. Eh! 1, 2, 3, eh! Yeah. So the story progresses to where the son wasted his wealth in wild living. And you see some of the people chuckle a bit. Now, the reason why they're chuckling is everybody knows that foolish African sons steal money, run away to the capital city, and sow their wild oats. And you notice that there are a few people that have more of a knowing chuckle to their chuckle than others. Now, when we get to the part of the famine, the foolish young and where the foolish young man was hungry, you see that people are outright laughing at his misfortune. Okay? When I read that the son got a job working for a foreigner, taking care of pigs, you see them slapping their legs and going, because pigs are as disgusting to the Manica people as they are to the Jews. Okay? It's just a really bad situation. Now, the climax of the laughter came when I read that the pig slop began to look good to the young man. Okay? By this time, you notice there were tears in their eyes. They were laughing so hard. One guy actually, no exaggeration, fell off the bench and was laying on the floor, laughing so hard no sound was coming out of his mouth. He was absolutely paralyzed with mirth. Okay? Wow. We don't get that kind of a reading of the reaction to the reading of the parable of the lost son in the North American church, do we? And that's kind of probably because our culture is not as close to the culture of the Bible as the Manica culture is. Okay? Now, and so then you and I we realize that even though they're not meaning to, the Manica people are actually teaching us something about Jesus that we didn't know. We realize for the first time through them that Jesus must have been a winsome guy who could really bring it to the party. I mean, literally, he can bring life to a party. Now, when we get to the part where the young man planned to return to his father, the people in the group were thinking, oh, this is another senseless decision. Even Manica family members, when they've been gone for a long time on traveling, when they return, they have to come back with gifts for their family and friends. But you would understand their surprise when in the story it was the father that ran out to meet his wicked and smelly son with hugs, kisses, and gifts. That's all right. You can react. 1, 2, 3. Eh! Finally, we get to the part where the father said to the older brother, but we should be glad and celebrate. Your brother was dead, but he is now alive. He was lost and has now been found. You notice that there is no sound but the crickets in the night. Why? Because everybody in that hut realized that it was a parable. They get it that the Father stands for God. These people have never heard such grace and mercy attributed to God before in their entire life. One finds nothing remotely like it in the Quran. Certainly no one has ever seen that kind of grace acted out. A new, unearthly category of thought has just entered their Muslim minds. And I was there to bring it. I was there in that position to bring it because you sent me there. We are light with kingdom values in a strategic position.